All right, we'll get going here. Thanks for coming. Hope everybody's having a good session so far. I was just having a conversation about the previous session, and I know a lot of people. I think we're thrown off the track a little bit by the word gamification, but I took a lot of notes, and I think there are a lot of us in the room that could benefit from what Joel was talking about. This session, we're going to be getting a little more nuts and bolts. I don't think we're going to have to be concerned with finding at least one takeaway you can go back to your office on Monday and scare your staff with and say, we need to do this. I think you're going to, the risk here is you're going to run out of paper to take notes on. So we have great all-star heavy hitters here. At the end, Phil Binko, Wayne Cooper, and Phil Ash, and I'm going to get out of the way and let them talk because they've got a great presentation. So thank you all for speaking today. Oh, and I'm sorry. Can I take 2 seconds?
Yes.
Just since this is the first session in the track, I'm Ed Coburn. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Technology for Sales and Marketing track. I meant to introduce myself first. I ought to do that. And I also want to acknowledge my co-chair in the back, Nancy Brand from Chartwell, who's in the back of the room. If the questions or anything, we're happy to help. Thank you. Turn it over.
Is this being recorded?
Kathy, do you know if this is being recorded?
Yeah. So we need to repeat questions and all that? Okay. All right, welcome. I am Phil Ash, and I am the publisher at Investing Daily primarily, which is a consumer brand. And I was asked to put this panel together, and my first partner quit on me, and I was fortunately given two more partners. We went a little crazy, and we actually put slides together, even though this was really supposed to be more of a panel. So there's a lot of different ways to tackle this, and of course there's millions of metrics that one can use to measure their business. What we wanted to do for starters is just put up an example of a business model which probably in large part represents a lot of your businesses. You may think of it as a product pyramid or a funnel, but we just wanted to kind of give an overview of the sort of metrics that we're going to look at, and I want you all to maybe make some quick notes to yourself on any points in this funnel whereby either you have a good metric you want to share or where you're struggling to measure something and you want to ask us and make sure we cover it so we can involve you in the process and make sure that we help you walk away with something useful. So basically what we've got here is we've got the lead generation step initially, and you've got people coming in and subscribing to e-letters. Then we push them up to our front-end subscription products or one-off products, and then upsell them, and maybe we have a membership site or a portal at the bottom of the funnel where we're ultimately trying to push people to. Now I've overlaid some marketing channels on here, which are the channels we're going to talk about in terms of metrics. And these are just some examples here. There's certainly others, but give you a little overview of some of the ones we're going to cover. So for starters, we have, and I'm going to cover the e-letter section primarily, and how we drive people into our e-letters, our PPC, which is paid search advertising, co-registration, direct ad placement, search engine optimization, and swaps of email lists with other partners of ours. And then we've got direct mail, force-free trials, and sales process that are trying to sell people directly into subscriptions, one-shots, or events. And Phil is going to cover the sales process. And then I believe Wayne is going to get into lead nurturing and automated marketing systems and such, and the various metrics involved with that. And of course, on the right, we've got throughout this whole process, you can be using email, direct mail, or telemarketing to push people through the funnel. So talking a little bit about lead generation and conversion for starters. And I'm sure I've violated everybody's first rule of presentations here by giving you a wall of text, but that's how we're going to do it. So, the first three items on the left, pay-per-click, co-registration, and direct ad placement, those all essentially use the same metrics. And in our case, we use a vendor for all of those. And we have somebody in-house who essentially watches the metrics and manages the vendor and gets them to improve in most cases. So the first metric that we're looking at is our cost per acquisition. And we know from our history and from talking with competitors what a reasonable target is on those particular metrics. Now, so with cost per acquisition, it's simply if you're going to spend $10,000 with Google on paid ads and you're going to get 1,000 people to sign up, you've paid $10 for each of those signups or leads. Now, for us, a target range is roughly $5 to $8. And if I'm talking about co-registration, it might be down in the $2 to $3.50 range. And I'm not even sure what it is on our direct ad placement. Direct ad placement, by the way, for those of you who don't know, that might be just a term we use internally, is when we're just going out and placing ads in other people's e-letters and sending out dedicated emails to their lists. Yeah, Dan?
So what goes into the cost side? Is it just the direct cost of the paid search words, or you go internal cost into that cost structure as well?
Yeah, good question. We add into, the question is what goes into the cost side of the cost per acquisition calculation. We add in our vendor cost as well as the cost of the actual ad placement. We do not include any internal staff costs. I think the important thing is probably on all these channels is just to be consistent so you can compare apples and apples. So does anybody need me to explain the 30-second overview of what paid search co-reg or direct ad placement is? I don't know if you all use these channels or not. So once we're going to circle back to cost per acquisition in a moment, because once we know what a name is worth to us after this is all played out, we can then go back and readjust what CPA we're willing to pay. So we go ahead, we will tell our vendor, here's our maximum CPA that we're willing to pay. And of course, you get more granular on certain keyword sets, certain products, et cetera. But we give them a target, and then we'll go ahead and get our first tranche of names. Maybe we've got 1,000 leads and I'm talking consumer again, so I just naturally use bigger numbers. We'll get 1,000 leads, and we'll watch that play out over several months. And we will watch our return on investment. And what we're looking for is a target break-even time frame. And for us, it could be in the 9 to 15-month range. And once we have done this for 9 to 15 months, then we can start to see where the various tranches are at each month as they progress, and it starts to act as a bit of an early warning system that maybe we're now getting some bad names coming into the funnel, and we should ratchet down our budget and maybe move those funds over to another marketing channel, and so forth. And once we have gotten many months out, then we can start to calculate the value of a name, the sales we've gotten off of that tranche of names divided by the number of names that were in that tranche. That then, let's say that tells us that a name is now worth $11, and we've been using a maximum cost per acquisition of $5. We may now be able to decide, okay, we're going to ratchet it up to $8 cost per acquisition that we're willing to pay. So you can see how that cycle completes itself. And then we just look at conversion rate as well, just the number of buyers divided by the number of signups. I recently started another business in a gaming sector, and that's been very nice to start a business from scratch and build a list from scratch where you're not having to look at time frames necessarily, but we have about 4.5% penetration of conversion off of our sign-up list. So that's kind of established the bar for us that as we keep adding email names, we need to keep that conversion rate at north of 4.5%. Moving on to swaps, that's essentially the same as direct ad placement, but it's a barter system. So, you might think that your denominator is zero. You had no cost going into it. Well, of course, if you're doing a swap, you're having to give up space in return. Now, we know what an email slot is worth to us based on the ROI we get off of marketing our house products. So we'll go ahead and use that internal factor as our de facto cost when doing that calculation. Then we've got natural search, and we've got, this 20-tab, spreadsheet with all kinds of metrics on that. From my perspective, really the only thing that I'm interested in from my guy on that is just how many people are coming to the site and how many of those names are we actually converting into an email address or a lead. So, do either of you have anything to add to that, or does anybody in the audience have any metrics they want to share that they use in any of these categories, or any questions?
So
Yeah.
A quick comment. When you're on, or question, when you're looking at swaps, the opportunity cost of your media to promote your own product, there's also brand reputational considerations that go in there that you get a benefit if you're selling your own product that you don't get if you're selling someone else's. On the other hand, you're getting introduced to someone else. Do you try to factor those things in at all, or is this just, you're just looking at the average? If you have an email slot, on average you're producing $5,200, and that's what you're looking at as the opportunity cost.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Ed essentially asked, when doing a swap and calculating the opportunity cost, do we essentially add a multiplier for the lifetime value, the missed lifetime value opportunity, had we sold one of our own products into that slot instead of a partner product? We consider that in the back of our minds. We do not add any hard numbers in for that, and I guess that's because one of the biggest challenges in our business is getting new subscribers. So we place tremendous value on being able to convert a new subscriber from an outside list. So I guess it's kind of a wash for us.
I would also add, in our businesses, in addition to dedicated emails, we also have e-newsletters that have some slots, and there's always excess inventory there. And we also find there's a little fatigue if we're just promoting our own stuff all the time. So, text ads for partners, we find does not hurt our brand, and there's plenty of opportunities to add those to the e-newsletters. We're much more careful and cautious on the dedicated emails. When we're giving people content, we're much more comfortable putting some text ads in there.
Is there any rule of thumb for pricing direct ad placements, either the ones you're buying or if you accept them on your own e-letters for pricing that they have?
You want to know if there's an actual numerical target that we use for direct ad placement? So first, to clarify, we don't sell any space on our products. We will only do reciprocal swap deals. But when we go out and buy media, it's similar to paid search in terms of what we're paying per lead. Yeah. Yep, go ahead. For paid search, we use the Rim Kaufman, I believe is the name. I think they're in Charlottesville, Virginia. And they hold themselves out to be fantastic and highly connected with Google, and except when Google shut us down, and then they'd never heard of Google. On direct ad placement, we use a woman named Nancy Cathy. And I think Net Effects Marketing might be their company. But they came out of the investing space, so that's really where their Rolodex is. I don't know how helpful they would be for others. Co-registration, we use various firms that are focused on the consumer investing space as well. Yeah. Sorry, let me just follow up on Ed's question. One other thing I just recalled is in terms of brand impact, We do also look at unsubscribes when we run a partner email to our list, and I don't know what our metric is on that, but we don't want to have more unsubscribes that day than an average day. So, sorry, go ahead, Phil.
One thing that's not exactly here, but I think is related on the inside sales part is we'll take pay-per-click ads, and we'll take our spend on pay-per-click ads with the responses on the pay-per-click ads, and then analyze those on how many converted actually into membership. And then we can take that and divide it by the cost of those individual pay-per-click ads plus aggregate, and we can see what that lead cost is per member, and then it's just our decision as to what the value is, what the value is worth. And have somebody kind of work that, because those pay-per-click costs are volatile, and they can rise and fall pretty quickly. Before you know it, they got your credit card.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that we got Amex miles on all of that Google spend, we would definitely curtail it more quickly in many cases. Anyone need a flight anywhere for free? I got plenty I'm giving away. So we're going to move off this slide unless anyone has any further questions. All right, and you're doing sales, Phil?
Yeah.
Okay, super.
Thank you, Phil. I guess the last session was on gamification, and I think that maybe, I don't know how most of y'all feel, I think that I've seen a lot of salesmen come in through our organization who have taken lots of courses on gamification, and they're a lot better at trying to game us than they were at selling. So maybe some folks have had that problem. Let me just ask you, inside sales is taking a more prominent role in our distribution channels. How many of you actually use inside sales as in part of your mix or telemarketing right now? And if you don't, raise your hand. And how many of you might be planning to incorporate inside sales? Okay, great. Sorry, I have some notes here on my iPhone, which really makes it convenient, except it makes it rude because it turns off. So sorry about that. And if you're using inside sales right now, raise your hand if you're using a CRM system. Okay. Salesforce, SalesLogix, any of the others? Okay, that's great, because I think is a real key factor in your foundation for sales metrics. So the purpose of this section is really to focus on the foundation of sales metrics, and if we can get the foundation right, then everything else falls right into place. So there are, at the risk of oversimplifying everything, there are only 4 ways to increase revenue through sales, and those 4 ways are to increase the number of opportunities in the sales pipeline, real opportunities, to shorten the length of the sales cycle, to increase the closing rate, and to increase the dollar size of the transaction. That's it. I mean, if anybody else knows of another way, then I'd like to know it too. But everything else drives from those 4 areas. And if we can get those 4 areas nailed down, and we can measure the important things of those 4 areas, then we can manage our sales, we can help our sales guys do a better job. I would just say at this point, how many of you have a sales manager or are thinking about hiring a sales manager at some point? Well, at the risk of sounding irrelevant, if you hire a sales manager, 2 questions you want to get answers to. One is, from the sales manager themselves, how do they put together a forecast? That's very important. The second question goes to the sales manager's last boss or his references, which is, how accurate was this person's sales forecasts? Because sales managers are salesmen as well, and we need to make sure that we compensate for that in our interview process. So
So with regard to the number of opportunities in the pipeline, with our CRM systems, and if you don't have a CRM system, you can still do this. It's just a little bit more labor intensive. How many leads per week are we getting in? Are they new leads, or are they leads from existing customers who have purchased something, where we know that that when those things that are purchased by people turn into leads that are effective for us. So per week, per day, per month, lead generation, the number of dials, connects, and outcomes, the list quality, and the lead quality. So here's a very important criteria. What is a lead? And it's it's critical to define what a lead is in the organization so that everybody understands and agrees to a lead. Because if I'm selling to SIPA members and I say, well, you know, Heather's a lead because I met her at SIPA, you know, so she's a name on my list. Well, some people might think that's a lead. Wow, she's a SIPA member, she runs a publishing company, you know, this is great. But she may not be a lead at all for the stuff that we sell, or she may be. So what are the criteria for a lead, and what is a lead? And everybody has to get their heads around that. And if you do, then you can really track leads, and you can qualify leads as to whether they're more likely to result in a sale in the near term as opposed to the far term or never. And then to qualify and to quantify our collection of leads. You know, what are the outcomes of our lead generation efforts? How many dials are we making? If you have people who are setting appointments, how many appointments do they set? How many appointments show up? How many appointments evaporate? This all applies to telemarketing as well as to inside sales, but it goes a little deeper on the inside sales. And we can do that by list and see which lists actually work better. But the number of real opportunities in the pipeline is critical. One of the things that we've done with our pipeline is we qualify every single lead in the pipeline with a probability based on real measurable behaviors or actions. So if we talk to somebody on the phone and we have a good conversation with them and they say yes, they're interested, and they have to get approval for whatever, then maybe we know from history that that's a qualification or probability of 50% of those guys will actually result in a positive outcome. If they say, yeah, it sounds interesting, call me back in 6 months, maybe that's only 10%. But when you take that and you put it in your pipeline, then you can get an expected value of what your pipeline is, and over a period of time, you can really get that down so it's pretty accurate with regard to forecasting. The length of the sales cycle, I mean, this is really a function of the lead quality, the leads in the pipeline, separating the wheat from the chaff. And salespeople might like to have a lot of leads in their pipeline, and they show you the pipeline, and it's got all these great numbers in there, and some of them are big, and you got some elephant hunters out there, you know, you're going to do a $100,000 site license. But when can those actually happen? And that's a function of really these probabilities based on measurable events, and also on the selling skills of the salesperson, the product knowledge of the salesperson, and not least importantly, the industry knowledge of the salesperson. I mean, we're specialized. I mean, hardly anybody in this room, I mean, there's some overlap, but we go into these very specialized areas, and our target market participants, our customers, expect the people who they're talking to from our company to understand their business. That's not an unreasonable expectation. And they may be very polite and say, yeah, this sounds great. But at the end of the day, if they don't in their heart feel that the person on our side who they're talking with really gets them, then it might go into the sales mix and go into the pipeline, It'll just increase the average length of your sales cycle because it never closes. And our biggest competitor is not somebody else who's doing what we're doing. Our biggest competitor is indecision, or what we believe is indecision on the part of the customer. They may have actually made a decision, but we look at it as indecision because the salespeople have happy ears on, and they're not really hearing that the person is saying, no, I'm not going to do this. They just happen to say it in a way that's like, yeah, we'll think about it. You know, my boss has been out. We've got 17 other projects going on right now, and we'll get back to it later. It stays on your pipeline, and it's probably trash in some cases. Closing rate is really, once again, a function of lead quality, but also on the closing skills of the salespeople. There's a lot of sales training programs out there. Those skills have become much more refined lately. A lot of people have already made a decision as to what and what they're going to buy and who they're going to buy it from by the time they talk to a salesperson. So, I mean, there's a lot of other issues that go on with that, but that's the salesperson being able to quickly qualify people through probing and closing questions, and asking them, why are you doing this? What's the benefit to you? How is this going to help your company? I mean, getting all those questions answered up front helps qualify folks, and it's actually closing as well, because the prospect is making, if they're making affirmative action statements in response, they're coming closer and closer and closer to a positive outcome for us. But those also help with your probabilities, and you can actually bake those questions into Salesforce at some of the more enterprise levels of Salesforce. You can bake the qualifying questions and closing questions in there, and those can really drive your probabilities as well. The size per sale. What can we do once we have that customer on the phone? What can we do if they're favorably disposed to increase the number of the dollars that we bring in? We've done programs that really work where if we do 2 or 3 year subscriptions, that the salespeople get a little bit extra. It kind of gets the sales guys focused on it. We're already talking to them. 1 year subscription is X. A 3 year subscription is 2.5 times X. One person subscribing is X. 6 people subscribing ends up being almost 3 times X. But we have them there. They're already engaged. They're already looking at things positively. Hey, let's just get this done, and now you don't have to worry about it for 3 years. You don't have to go through budget approval. But what we want to do is measure all of these things. What is our average transaction size today? What can we do to change it? And then what is it in a month? What is it in a week? What is it in 6 months, in a year? And those are the things that really I think drive everything. Pipeline management, making sure that the sales folks and your sales manager or yourselves have clear visibility into the pipeline, and that you all agree that that pipeline is in fact real. I mean, there's going to be stuff that falls out, and there's going to be garbage, and there's going to be people who say, yes, I'm doing it, and they end up not doing it. But for the most part, keeping that accurate and keeping it relevant and reliable is just a function of setting it up clearly with everybody involved, your sales team, your sales manager, and other folks in the company as well. Are there any questions that, yes, Jim?
You might have alluded to this earlier, Phil, about, you said that Salesforce has the ability to program in, and I think you might have said at certain levels of your Salesforce subscription, maybe you were alluding to it, to put in certain criteria. I'm not sure what you were alluding to, but I'm keying in specifically on number 1 under pipeline management, probability to close by stage.
Right.
I went to the sales half day yesterday, and I've been reading this whole thing about sales metrics. And one of the things that occurred to me was, just what you were talking about, what is a lead? What is a stage? What constitutes moving from one stage to the next?
Right.
So I guess my short question is, do you have
Yes.
be. It seems like so much of this marketing automation and all of this, the definitions of what those stages are have to be very well defined and then, as uniformly as possible applied across your sales team. Did they qualify?
And the questions to qualify them can be baked into your sales force. So, yes, you can have those in there, and there are these little apps you can use. And are we running out of time?
Well, we want to be mindful of time. I also want to let people know, right after the break, the next session is on Salesforce integration right back in this room. So
Okay.
we can maybe able to dig into this when you can.
So, but yes, and you can even get little dials, little graphs that show you where they are based on how they answered the questions. It's pretty cool. And I'm be respectful of Wayne's time, sorry, but I'll be here if I can answer any questions. Thank you.
So many of us who built sales organizations, the next step is to develop marketing automation techniques to help improve the funnel of leads that we're delivering to the sales team to improve their effectiveness. It's a big investment having salespeople, sales managers, and the more you can do up front to really give them quality names to call, that really helps the whole model. So just had a few slides on what we are doing in some of our businesses in the lead nurturing and marketing automation. But before I begin, let me just ask by a show of hands, how many of you have lead nurturing programs in place? Great. And how many of you are using marketing automation software to help in that, like Marketo, Eloqua, Pardot? Okay. So about half the group. So I'll just share with you that we've tried a lot of different things in our different businesses and made a lot of mistakes along the way, and this is kind of what we've gravitated towards as kind of the best practice in our businesses. In terms of our marketing funnel, in addition to the outside advertising we do, we have a big database in our different markets. So I'll talk about one of our businesses, Vanguard Media, that's in the safety space. We've identified in the North American market about 300,000 safety directors, safety managers at the facility or corporate level. It's a big mix of titles, sizes of companies, et cetera. And that's where we're kind of starting our lead nurturing program from that overall base. Within that, we look at among that universe, how many of them are actually interacting with us, open an e-newsletter of ours, visit our website, ideally are a customer of one of our products. And that's a subset of that overall universe. We then go through, we use Pardot and Salesforce within our companies, but we go through a qualification process. And there's two parts to the qualification. One is we do a profile grading of each prospect, and then stage 3, we also do an engagement scoring process. The profiling, the grading is really based on demographics. We look at the size of the company that they're working for, and we look at what their specific title is. So the more specific to a safety director or safety manager, that gets a higher score, and the size of the enterprise. Our target sweet spot is really upper middle market companies. So $100 million to $1 billion is our sweet spot. Some of the biggest companies, $1 billion plus, have their own sales training programs. So if somebody has the right title, safety director, safety VP, safety manager at one of those size companies, they'd get a score of an A. If they're a little outside that, either above or below in terms of the size and or title, they'd get a B, and then so on. Regardless of what their grading is, we're also sending out e-newsletters until they ask us to stop on different topics and segments, and that's part of our nurturing program. And through that process, we're doing a grading of what their engagement with us is. And so if somebody opens that e-newsletter, they get certain points for that. If they click on a certain number of stories per month, they get more points. If they go to our video or a demo on our website, they get a lot more points for that. If they go to our pricing page, they get even more points for that. And so it's kind of a matrix between our grading and our engagement scores that we use to then come up with a grade that of leads that we deliver to our sales force. And we give it to them in a prioritization process. So we say, okay, these are the A-graded profile people who have a score of 50 plus. They've visited our website, they show a real interest. You go after those first. And then number 2, you're going to go after the people who might have a B score, but who are engaged with us. And then we have found, we've tried different ways. Do you go from, between the engagement and the scoring, the grading, which ones do you do first? But we found that the engagement is more representative of a potential client. So we'll go down that path, and then we go through that prioritization. So that's how we develop the funnel for what we're going to deliver to our sales organization. And those are marketing qualified leads. Then the sales team takes it over.
Wait, what was the before on your last slide? Sorry. Past sales. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so we call them MQLs, or marketing qualified leads. And then the sales team has their own filter. They have appointment setters who are going through these, and once in a while they're verifying if that person is still there, or change the address, or looking at their LinkedIn profiles, etc. And so about a little over 90% of what marketing hands over are still, our appointment setters find are actually still in their job. But that becomes the sales qualified lead, the people that are still at that same job that we thought were in our marketing database. And then we go through the generating of opportunities. We have appointment setters who try to schedule appointments with the best prospects, and then we hand them on to our sales team, and then we track very carefully the won opportunities, the conversions, and we do that a variety of ways. We look at what the conversion rate is by salesperson, by sales team, by vertical, by marketing source and list source as well. So that's an area where there's a lot of value in doing some real analysis to really find out where the best conversions are. And then the next area is the holy grail. We look at where are we generating real customers, and we look at the how much revenue is attained for that year from that contract. We look at the average sale. We look at how many full-time equivalent salespeople it took to get that number of new customers in. We look at the pipeline and pipeline value using the Salesforce models as well. And then we look at lifetime value of each of our customers. We know from history, on average, what our renewal rate conversion and renewal rates are. So we'll look at not just the return on investment of a specific marketing campaign for this year, but we also look at it relative to the lifetime value of that customer. So that's the lifetime value to the cost of acquired customer ratio. And we also use metrics that we look at months to recovery. And we track those very carefully, and we particularly track them by salesperson. And that really, we find, really helps with the return on investment of this whole process. And I'll quickly just touch on onboarding, which is something that we've also found a really valuable lever. We directly correlate onboarding and how good we do on that to what the conversion of renewal rates are a year down the road. And I think as more and more of us have online membership sites in addition to a paper newsletter, there's a friction point that some people just, sounds good, they buy it, they're not even sure what they're buying, and whether they actually use it or not is going to be the critical factor 11 and a half months later whether they renew. So we track with each customer, how many users are in that account, how many times it's been logged in, that customer account has been logged in on, how much time spent on site, and page views and things like that. And our account executives have a process that they follow that it flags for them in their Salesforce account. We have a different team, account managers, who manage this process and the renewal process. But they all have to make a welcome call in the first week, and then there's follow-up content through Pardot as well as follow-up calls based upon their engagement with the system. So we actually use Pardot for our new customers too. So we have just like we have a lead nurturing system, we have an onboard nurturing system for new customers. So we'll look at whether they opened up that first e-newsletter as a member that first week. If they did, great. We send them another piece of information or a welcome gift or something of that sort. But most importantly, we're tracking those people who have not opened up or logged into some of their gifts or content that we're sending them in those first few weeks. And we're making sure that our salespeople are then calling them back. Our account managers are calling these people to find out why they're not using this. And It might be that their login information they lost their password, they forgot to tell their boss that they have this service, etc. But we find that if we can unclog this at the beginning in the first month and get them engaged and using it and starting new habits, we have a much higher likelihood of renewing them on the back end. So just in the interest of time, I'll turn it back over to Phil.